There are moments when the sky speaks in a language so clear that even those who rarely listen begin to feel its urgency. This is one of those moments. Across distant horizons and quiet coastlines, instruments are recording patterns that do not follow the old paths. The winds hesitate where they once rushed, the temperatures rise where they once rested, and in this shifting balance a storm is forming, not just in the clouds, but in the understanding of those who study them. This is not a storm of ordinary measure. It does not arrive as a simple guest, knocking and leaving. It gathers in unusual ways, drawing strength from contrasts that should not coexist so intensely. Warm waters meet unstable air currents, and instead of settling into harmony, they begin to amplify one another. The result is something rare, something that resists easy comparison. Those who observe the skies are not raising their voices out of habit. They are doing so because what they see does not fit within the familiar stories of weather. When patterns break, they invite reflection. For a long time, the rhythm of the earth followed cycles that could be studied, predicted, and respected. Now, those rhythms are bending. The storm forming today is not only an event, it is a signal. It tells us that the balance we once relied on is shifting, quietly but powerfully. And like all deep changes, it asks for awareness before it demands action. There is a tendency to see storms as isolated events, something that begins, intensifies, and then fades into memory. But this storm is different in its meaning. It is connected to a larger movement, an unfolding change in the atmosphere itself. The oceans hold more heat than before. The air carries more energy than it once did. And when this stored energy seeks release, it does not do so gently. It expresses itself in forms that challenge expectation. Those who study the skies have spent years watching subtle signs, small deviations, slight irregularities. But now the signs are no longer subtle. They are clear, insistent, and difficult to ignore. This is why the alarm is being sounded, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Recognition that something new is emerging, something that requires both attention and humility. To understand this moment, one must look beyond the storm itself. The storm is only the visible expression of deeper forces. It is like a wave on the surface of a vast ocean, impressive, powerful, but shaped by currents far below. If we focus only on the wave, we miss the movement that created it. If we understand the currents, we begin to see the pattern. And so, the message is not only about preparation, though preparation is wise. It is also about awareness. Awareness of how interconnected all things are. The air, the water, the land, and the choices made upon it. When one element shifts, the others respond. When balance is disturbed, the effects ripple outward, often in ways that are not immediately seen. There is no need for panic in the face of this storm, but there is a need for clarity. To see it not as an isolated anomaly, but as part of a larger transformation. To listen not only to the thunder, but to the silence that precedes it. In that silence lies understanding. The storm will come as all storms do. It will rise, it will move, and it will pass, but what it represents will remain. A reminder that the world is changing, and that change, once set in motion, does not easily return to what it was, a rare and unusual storm pattern. The storm is not typical. It is forming through uncommon atmospheric conditions that experts do not usually observe. There are times when nature follows its familiar script, repeating patterns that have been observed, measured, and understood over generations. Then there are moments when that script begins to change, quietly at first, and then with a clarity that cannot be ignored. This storm belongs to the latter. It is not forming in the way storms usually do, and that alone is enough to draw attention from those who spend their lives studying the sky. The currents that guide its movement are behaving differently, as if influenced by forces that have grown stronger or shifted in direction. What makes this situation so unusual is not just the intensity of the storm, but the way it is coming together. Typically, storms rely on a balance of conditions: warmth, moisture, and air movement working in a somewhat predictable harmony. Here, that harmony is distorted. Warm ocean waters are feeding the system more energy than expected, while unstable air currents are allowing it to organize in ways that defy the usual limits. It is as if the storm is drawing from multiple extremes at once, creating something that feels unfamiliar even to experienced observers. This unfamiliarity is what causes concern. When something cannot be easily compared to past events, it becomes harder to predict its behavior. Forecast models rely on history, on patterns that have repeated enough times to provide guidance. But when a storm steps outside those patterns, certainty begins to fade. This is why careful voices are growing more urgent. It is not alarm for its own sake, but a response to the recognition that this system does not fit neatly into existing knowledge. There is also a deeper layer to this moment. A storm like this does not appear in isolation. It is shaped by broader conditions that have been evolving over time. The oceans, slowly absorbing heat, are now releasing that energy into the atmosphere. The air, holding more moisture than before, becomes a more powerful partner in storm formation. These changes do not announce themselves loudly at first, but when they converge, their effects become undeniable. So this storm stands as more than a weather event. It is an example of how small shifts, accumulating over time, can lead to outcomes that feel sudden and unexpected. It invites attention not only to its path, but to the conditions that made it possible. And in that attention, there is an opportunity to observe more closely, to understand more deeply, and to recognize that the patterns once taken for granted may no longer hold in the same way. Breakdown of familiar weather rhythms, long-standing natural weather patterns are shifting, indicating deeper environmental changes. For a long time, the world's weather moved with a kind of quiet reliability. Seasons arrived with a familiar rhythm, storms followed paths that could be studied, and even in their qua, there was a sense of order beneath the surface. This order allowed people to prepare, to adapt, and to trust that while nature could be powerful, it was not entirely unpredictable. But now, that sense of reliability is beginning to shift, and the change is subtle enough to go unnoticed at first, yet profound enough to reshape expectations. What was once considered stable is now showing signs of strain. Patterns that held steady for decades are bending, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in ways that ripple outward with greater consequence. Winds that once followed consistent routes are now wavering. Temperature boundaries that once stayed within limits are stretching beyond them. These are not sudden disruptions, but gradual changes that accumulate until they become visible in moments like this. The storm being observed is not just unusual because of its strength, but because it does not follow the pathways that similar storms once did. It drifts, adjusts, and evolves in ways that challenge the models built on past data. This is what makes the situation more complex. When the foundation of prediction begins to shift, uncertainty grows, and with that uncertainty comes the need to reconsider what is known and what must be learned again. This is not about abandoning understanding, but about expanding it. The old patterns were never permanent, they were simply the best reflections of conditions at the time. As those conditions change, the patterns must change as well. The atmosphere is not fixed, it responds continuously to what it is given. When it receives more heat, more moisture, more imbalance, it expresses those changes through its behavior. There is a quiet lesson in this transformation. It shows that stability is not something guaranteed, but something that exists within certain conditions. When those conditions shift, stability can give way to something more dynamic, more uncertain. And yet within that uncertainty lies the possibility of deeper awareness. By paying attention to these changes, by observing how the old rhythms are evolving, there is a chance to better understand the forces at work. So this moment is not only about a storm that stands apart, but about a world that is gradually redefining its own balance. The signs are there, not hidden, but waiting to be noticed. And once seen, they cannot easily be unseen. A warning signal, not just an event. The storm represents a larger message about changing climate systems, not just a one-time occurrence. There is a tendency to look at a storm as a single tune AAA, something that rises, reaches its peak, and then fades into memory. It is easy to focus on its winds, its VRSAD, and its immediate impact, as if it exists only within the boundaries of time and place in which it appears. But this way of seeing is incomplete. What is unfolding now is not just a storm in isolation, but a signal emerging from a much larger system, one that has been shifting quietly over many years. To understand this, one must look beyond the surface. The storm is only the visible expression of deeper processes, shaped by forces that are not always immediately apparent. The oceans, vast and patient, have been absorbing heat over long periods. This stored warmth does not remain still. It slowly interacts with the atmosphere above it. At the same time, the air itself has been changing, holding more moisture and energy than it once did. These are not sudden developments, but gradual transformations that build over time, layer by layer. When these underlying conditions reach a certain point, they begin to interact in ways that produce something more noticeable. A storm forms, but it carries within it the imprint of all those unseen changes. Its strength, its structure, and even its unpredictability are shaped by the environment that created it. In this sense, the storm is not just an event, it is a message, a visible outcome of invisible shifts. What makes this moment significant is the clarity of that message. In the past, such signals may have been faint, easy to overlook or explain away as rare anomalies, but now they are becoming more pronounced, more frequent, and harder to dismiss. Each unusual storm, each deviation from expected patterns, adds to a growing understanding that something fundamental is evolving within the system itself. This does not mean that every storm carries the same meaning, but it does suggest that the conditions giving rise to them are no longer what they once were. The system is becoming more energized, more complex, and at times more unstable. And when a system changes in this way, its expressions, storms, winds, and weather events also begin to change. So to see this storm clearly is to recognize it as part of a broader movement. It is not separate from the whole, but deeply connected to it. And in that connection lies its true significance, pointing not just to what is happening now, but to what may continue to unfold. Growing energy in Earth systems, increased heat in oceans, and energy in the atmosphere are fueling stronger and more unpredictable storms. Beneath the visible movement of clouds and wind, there is an unseen accumulation of energy shaping what is now being witnessed. The atmosphere does not create intensity from nothing. It responds to what it is given. Over time, the oceans have been gathering heat, holding it quietly within their depths. This warmth does not remain isolated. It slowly rises, transfers, and feeds the air above, changing the very character of the atmosphere. What once required rare alignment to produce a powerful storm now finds more frequent support from these elevated energy levels. Air that is warmer can hold more moisture, and moisture is one of the essential ingredients of a storm's strength. As this moisture increases, it becomes easier for weather systems to grow rapidly, to organize more efficiently, and to sustain themselves longer than expected. The result is not just stronger storms, but storms that behave in ways that seem less predictable. They may intensify faster, shift direction unexpectedly, or maintain their qua beyond what older patterns would suggest. This growing energy does not announce itself with a single event. It reveals itself gradually, through patterns that become harder to ignore. Scientists and observers notice that thresholds once considered limits are being crossed more often. What was once described as rare begins to appear with increasing frequency. These are not isolated anomalies. They are signs of a system that is carrying more potential than before, and therefore expressing that potential more forcefully. The storm forming now is a clear reflection of this reality. It draws from a reservoir of warmth and moisture that has been building over time. Its unusual characteristics are not sluchainii, but shaped by the conditions that surround it. When energy accumulates without balance, it seeks release, and that release often comes in forms that challenge expectations. This is why such storms can feel surprising, even when the underlying causes have been developing for years. There is an important understanding within this. The power of the storm is not only in its winds or rainfall, but in what it reveals about the environment that created it. It shows that the system is no longer operating within the same boundaries. It has expanded, intensified, and become more dynamic. And with that change comes a new level of uncertainty, but also a clearer picture of the forces at work. In observing this, one begins to see that the storm is not an isolated disturbance, but a natural outcome of accumulated energy. It is the atmosphere responding to its conditions, expressing what has been building beneath the surface for a long time. Need for awareness and understanding the situation calls for calm awareness and deeper understanding rather than panic, recognizing the interconnected nature of the environment. In moments like this, the first impulse is often to react with urgency, to focus on the el-qua of the storm and the uncertainty it brings. Yet there is another response that holds equal value, one rooted in clarity rather than fear. When faced with something unfamiliar, the mind seeks quick conclusions, but deeper understanding comes from patient observation. This is what is being called for now, not just preparation for what may come, but awareness of what it means. Awareness begins with seeing the storm for what it truly is. Not as an isolated TTNAA that appears without context, but as part of a broader system in motion. Every HRKD in the atmosphere is connected to something beyond itself. The winds are shaped by pressure differences, those pressures by temperature, and those temperatures by conditions that extend far beyond the immediate horizon. To recognize this interconnectedness is to move beyond surface-level understanding and into a more complete view of what is unfolding. There is also a need to understand the difference between panic and attention. Panic narrows perception. It focuses only on immediate danger and often leads to confusion. Attention, on the other hand, expands perception. It allows space to notice patterns, to listen carefully, and to respond with intention rather than impulse. In the presence of a storm that does not follow familiar rules, this kind of attention becomes especially important. It helps transform uncertainty into insight. Those who study these patterns are not simply reacting to a single event. They are observing a series of signals that, when viewed together, point toward a changing balance. Their warnings are not meant to create fear, but to invite readiness and understanding. It is an acknowledgement that the world is shifting in ways that require a different kind of awareness than before. To meet this moment well is to hold both realism and calm at the same time. Realism recognizes that conditions are changing and that their effects can be significant. Calm ensures that this recognition does not turn into overwhelm. Together, they create a steady response, one that is capable of adapting rather than resisting. In the end, the storm will pass as all storms do. But the awareness it brings can remain, and in that awareness lies something valuable. The ability to see more clearly, to understand more deeply, and to respond not just to what is happening, but to what it reveals about the world itself.